Hello, everyone. Welcome. If you're new here, I am Simon, the marketing webinar specialist at Salesforce Ben, and I will be your host for today. If you're not new here, then welcome back. Thanks for joining us again, and we're super happy to have you here. In today's session, you will be hearing from Salesforce experts on multi-industry solutions for enhancing your post-close installation. As we wait for everyone to join, do feel free to drop in the chat box where you're tuning in from. I'm currently based in London, so yeah, be nice to hear where everyone is right now. So whilst you have a think on that and drop it in the chat box, I will get started. So product installation is, of course, a crucial phase for many industries with many moving parts. But despite it being so crucial, it does come with its own unique set of challenges. In this session, you'll be hearing from our speakers' experiences and understand a little bit more about the pros and cons to different approaches to managing product installations whilst leveraging Salesforce, of course. So by the end of this session, you should understand the best practices for gathering data insights to feed into the data cloud. You should leave with some strategies for mapping out complex processes and systems, and also understand how to make special consideration for the clients with unique needs so that you can maximize their value without adding unnecessary complexities. So our speakers for today are Eric and Jared from Work Relay, Danny, a Salesforce consultant, and also Vanessa, a Salesforce business analyst. They bring a whole host of experience with them, and over the course of the next hour, we'll be sharing their learnings with you. So without further ado, I shall hand over to our wonderful speakers, and I will see you again for the Q&A.
Thank you, Saima. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, wherever you are tuning in from. My name is Jared Tunn. Personally, I am calling in today from Austin, Texas, where it is a beautiful 80-something degrees and not over 100, which is shocking. So loving it. I am the Director of Global Partnerships at NeoStella. And I spent about a decade in the financial services sector at the beginning of my career, really in wealth management and mutual fund compliance before doing a 180 and getting my start in the Salesforce world about 5 or 6 years ago. So started as a member of a relationship management team for an SI facing Salesforce. Done many things since then, but right now I lead the global SI and ISV partnerships for NeoStella's product Work Relay. But I'm very excited to be joined today by some Salesforce experts who I'm sure some of you have heard of, and others I'm excited to get you introduced to today. So would love to allow you all to introduce yourselves. You'll be far better at than I am. So Vanessa, probably don't need much of an introduction for this audience, but would love for you to go ahead.
My ego. So hi, everybody. My name is Vanessa Grant. I'm currently a product owner and manager for financial services organization Mosaic, but I started my career in business operations. I was a VP of business ops for a SaaS at one point, and I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for 14 years with specialty in business analysis.
Awesome. Thank you. And Danny, how about you, my friend?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Danny. Right now, I'm head of operations at PConnect. I'm also 10K consultant, which is a partner of Work Relay and NeoStella. I am in the ecosystem for about 3 years, application architect, and on my personal life, I'm a digital nomad, and right now in Mexico, in Puerto Vallarta. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Oof, I'm jealous, Danny. And of course, last but not least, my colleague, Eric Eklund.
Thanks, Jared. Hi, everyone. Eric Eklund here. I'm the vice president of Work Relay, which means I'm involved in everything from product direction to go-to-market and helping the sales teams and just generally representing and helping to grow the product. Work Relay itself is a native Salesforce managed package where users can design, build, and execute business processes right in Salesforce, then measure the performance of those processes and manage to them, making sure that they're running efficiently and smoothly. I've been in the ecosystem about 15 or 16 years, most of those as an SI, now as an ISV partner. And I am calling in here today from our headquarters in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So jumping right into the topic here today, I know that post-close installation might not be something that immediately, tweaks the interest of everyone in the Salesforce world, but we want to really kind of showcase how this is a fairly applicable use case to a wide range of industries and many that we happen to work to great success with. So think about this not necessarily in terms of we're always installing a product, because certainly in the case of the manufacturing, fiber telecom industry, that's the case. But we also have services that are being installed. We have software that's being installed. There's a lot of various ways that we manage that post-close process that's going to likely involve a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different teams, a lot of potential third-party individuals. And generally, there's a lot of very time-critical, time-sensitive, aspects to these types of processes. So to set the stage for this conversation, we want to take a look at the why we're talking about this. What are some of those challenges that people are often facing? Let's talk about the type of metrics and data that we're trying to get to, and how we get there, and how that allows us to use a lot of other tools coming out these days, like AI, data cloud, other BI and analytics tools, right? But let's leave the conversation then with ways and best practices from this panel on various ways, means, tools that you can use to come to a better current state than you might be seeing today. So I would love to open this up to the panel to bring in some of your personal experience, and really let's focus on some of the current states that we've experienced in our times looking at these types of post-close installation processes. Whoever wants to jump in.
Yeah, maybe just
sure.
to
So,
go ahead, Danny. Go ahead.
sorry about that. I just want to say that the first bullet point here talks about the processes not being linear and simple, and sometimes customers, like the companies themselves, don't realize how complicated their processes are before putting it into technical terms. So before it's in Salesforce, you don't connect all the dots together to make sure everything aligns as you thought it would. So just moving it to a technical aspect sometimes helps the business realize what is the actual business process better.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly where I was going to go, Danny. Was a lot of these processes involve a lot of different people, departments, systems, timelines, those types of things, and you can see a lot of those represented in this bullet point here. And not really having that entire picture documented to begin with, just kind of may result in you automating or trying to systematize a process that isn't quite ready for it. So yeah, definitely, having to take a step back is critical and typical for users as they're looking at that post close, that product installation process.
Yeah, I mean, that's for me, that's like business analysis all day. Is we have to actually be able to document what that process is in that current state, be able to understand where the pain points are. I know we've talked about business process mapping before. Like, it's so critical for smoothing out and reducing friction. But I think one of the big challenges with after you close a deal, everybody talks about the lead to close, but there isn't necessarily any like massive out of the box feature in Salesforce, that without buying a whole cloud on how to do post close installation. And so you're really faced with the examining what the process is, and then either having to build it or having to work with an ISV or buy that cloud, depending on how complex it is. And it's usually pretty complex if you're working in one of those industries, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. No, my mind also went to the mapping exercises, right, that so often take place in that discovery phase, because it's something, just as someone who is more familiar with the business operations side of things, where that's something that I think there's a lot of cross-departmental understanding of what mapping out a process looks like and what that exercise looks like. But it's also during that point so often where people actually truly understand the complexity of their process as it stands today. And they start to understand, oh, wait, you also, accounting does this piece of it and legal does this. I didn't realize that, this was also concurrently happening. And so much of that, true complexity, the various pathways that these workflows take aren't even realized until you sit back from that higher point of view and actually put it all together end to end.
Yeah, one of my favorite activities when I was a Salesforce consultant was to get all the people that were involved in the same process to get in a room together so we could process so we could map out their process together, because it was amazing how this is a process they were already doing day to day, but they wouldn't necessarily even be on the same page on like what the steps were, what the handoffs were, what the order of the steps were. And for everybody to agree, that was a huge deal in any sort of process optimization.
Yeah, I don't think there's a single one of those exercises that I went through that they weren't surprised by something that the other department was doing, even though they're actively running their business this way, right? Whether it's finding out a different tool that they're using or a metric that they're tracking that would have been super helpful for one of the other groups involved in the process to know. It comes up over and over again, and I think as we kind of talk through that post close, that product installation process, those sellers, the ones that are working so hard to go from lead to closed business, they also have a stake in what happens, and so often they just lose all of that visibility at the time of getting that contract signed, and then just have to kind of hope or chase and find out, how are things going. Are we getting off on the right foot that I promised our customer would experience, so that I have a chance at renewal, that I have a chance at upsell. And it kind of goes into a little bit of a black box, and they end up kind of having to just hope that things come out all right in the end, which is obviously one of the things that we hope to solve with Work Relay by putting that process right in the same application, in the same interface as their selling process. Now they can monitor that ongoing installation process and help where they might need to as well, much more easily than dipping into another system or a spreadsheet or what have you.
Well, that's the thing. You talk about current states. So many times you get that because it's so well built out in Salesforce, you get it to close, and then all of a sudden it's turns into an email and a spreadsheet to track
Mhm.
post close, and all of a sudden the salesperson, you lose that 360. And so getting it into
Mhm.
Salesforce, I think, is really important if you want to actively keep a healthy relationship with that client.
Yeah, absolutely.
Once you map everything, you can also know exactly what you need to measure. What is the data that you need to gather onwards, so you can see how you optimize the processes and where are the friction points, and where things get stuck in the way. So you can then allocate resources or do some automation, or handle the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, the critical piece too is there's likely some folks tuning in that are like, well, I think our teams handle this well today. Our organization has, tightened up processes in various departments today that are involved in these types of use cases. And I would also challenge those folks with, I've been involved with organizations like that in the past too, where sales has a tightened up process, delivery has a tightened up process. Legal and accounting is off doing their own thing just fine, right? But there's no actual, interdependency oversight. There's no, well, how is this, actually performing between these teams, or as end to end as a whole, based on certain scenarios, certain timelines, certain, staffing or sales volume, or whatever the type of KPIs that you need to look at to be detailed in your forecasting and your potentially, proactive staffing and things of that nature. That's critical to know exactly how even tightened up pieces are all working together in a tightened up manner. So one thing I'd love to ask the audience, just to trickle in here, is what's your experience? What are you using today to manage these types of use cases? What have you used in the past? Have you tried to do this entirely within Salesforce? Has this been, an integrated tech stack of a bunch of different tools? are you the unfortunate ones having to switch to spreadsheets once that's marked closed won? Please go ahead and just in the chat, give us an idea of the range of experiences and tools that you're working with today. We'd love to get that insight.
Yeah, and Jared, that kind of brings up something that just pops to mind for me, right? Is as we look at these processes and how complex they are or potentially can be, and all of the people involved, if I put my Salesforce consultant or architect hat back on, I start quickly tallying up objects I need to create, automations I need to create, users I'm going to have to train, change I'm going to have to manage, right? And then what happens if that process needs to, be modified in the future? Okay, that's additional time. So not only that time to launch and get everyone up and ready and going, but then that additional time to maintain and change in the future just kind of keeps adding up and adding up, to where it almost becomes not insurmountable, but feeling like a very, very, very large project, where you're having to wrangle a whole lot of things. And it can be very difficult to even know where to start at that point.
Yeah,
another common
go ahead, Danny.
Sorry, Jared. I think another common pattern I got into a couple of times is that sometimes businesses enforce all the order processing on, let's say, the opportunity, like the latest object on the sales cycle. And then you have all kinds of fields like was delivered or time or effective date and so on and so on. The things that are like an object in Salesforce should represent one single thing, one single either process or an item or one single purpose. But on this post-processing, for some reason, it becomes like acceptable to combine those things, and then like maybe at some point people would create a record type or something like that. But it doesn't really, it's not scalable, and you will run into hiccups at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think personally, that's the antithesis of what Salesforce should be, right? Salesforce is a tool that's meant to hone our focus, to allow us to concentrate on what we should using the data that we have, to the best effect. So why aren't we structuring things in a manner that, for your standard users, especially if they're in sales, right? Like they hate doing work in Salesforce. They will do as little as possible. So let's hone their focus. Let's make sure they're cutting out the noise, focused where they need to be, know exactly what their tasks are in these processes, and then let's proceed at it, keep it moving, keep those handoffs, moving efficiently, because people aren't worried about, well, I got to scroll through and look at 200 fields, and that's right, what did I do last time? And hey, there's 2 required fields, but I know there's more I'm supposed to do. Whatever, I'll just do the 2 required fields. So make it easier for people too.
Yeah, I think it's part of that like maturation journey for a lot of businesses. Like everybody's going to start out with a spreadsheet. Like that's just kind of how it goes. But eventually, once you get a robust CRM like Salesforce, like you go, okay, we really do want to capture, what is happening with our clients at each point of their relationship with us. Throwing stuff on an opportunity, or I've also seen it where like, oh, we'll just track every step of the process and activities. That's also not great and, not easy to report on, but like maybe better than a spreadsheet. I don't know. At least, it's all in Salesforce. But I think that's where, like, even if you have it all in an opportunity, like it's besides, what a great user experience to have those 200 fields on your opportunity. It doesn't allow for that reporting, and you can't actually track where things are in the process, especially if you have a particularly complex post-close process. Understanding who's next in line, or who are the several people that are next in line, if there are concurrent steps that are taking place, where it's at, how long it's taking. Those are things that at a certain point, when you do reach that maturity level, you're going to want to track if you want to, be excellent.
Absolutely. And speaking of being excellent, Eric, I know the next slide, we just kind of talk about some of those impacts. And of course, you're meant to be a visual for us, probably to trigger some PTSD we've all had with some of these processes at organizations in the past, right? For me personally, not necessarily installation, but delivery of materials, through mutual fund compliance positions. We had quarterly financials, quarterly board books, and there was always these steps, in place, very timely. And we had to contact the accounting team. We had to get, the relationship management team. And so often, this is simply done by, email and shared folders and Excel and this and that. And to think about the amount of times that you're constantly having to follow up with someone, or an email got lost in the inbox, and it's just like, there's always better ways to do things. And, the impacts of what I felt was part of the reason why I left the industry.
I'll share a quick horror story. I was at a place once that I had a customer actually reach out to me on LinkedIn because like all their stuff had gotten like lost in the process. So you don't want to get it to that point. If you don't have those gates, you don't have that tracking, you don't have that analysis. It can leads to desperate customers, and certainly you don't want to get into any legal or contractual issues. Woo.
Yeah, the legal ones and the financial penalties, right? It's sometimes those contracts that you're putting together and getting in front of your customers are modified, right? And different milestones or commitments are made that if the rest of the team isn't aware of those, if it's not communicated to them, and then if you're not able to track what those commitments are, you're really putting yourself at risk. And I think this is potentially a piece that's often overlooked, or at least has been in my experience in consulting with even some of the most mature organizations, is we can't just put the process in place and put it on rails and hope that everything goes well, right? Or hope that we're tracking it well in a spreadsheet. We have to actually face the facts of what happens if this goes wrong, right? What if what if the installation or the implementation doesn't go as smoothly as we hoped, right? How can we identify early warning signs that it might not be going well, if things are starting to become delayed, so that we can prevent any of this menu of potential ramifications to the organization. So just making sure that we have the conversation about what the process is, but also having the conversation around what do we need to do, or what's going to happen if we don't hit this the right way, so that we can start identifying those points earlier in the process or within the process where someone should be alerted that some extra attention is potentially needed, or some extra care, or some extra resources.
Yeah, and you don't want to be that company that once the customer pays for the product, just like disappears. There's no customer support. There's no one to answer your calls. Nobody wants to be that.
No. And it becomes a whole host of other issues that you have to deal with. And I'm sitting here thinking, a thought just popped in my head about one of our clients, and the absolute checking off every single one of these boxes potentially. And that's a telecom infrastructure company who, amongst other things, they provide extra 5G capacity for events like the Super Bowl. And to think about the type of ramifications and blowback that would happen if all of a sudden a bunch of attendees, promoters, sponsors, teams, and everything all of a sudden didn't have, Wi-Fi or 5G connection, during the biggest event of the year, in some people's minds. That's mind blowing, the waterfall effect of all the issues that would take place. Thankfully, they use Work Relay. So.
Yeah, and I know, Jared, we were talking about like with post-close installations, no matter what industry you're in, especially if you're going to have an ongoing relationship with your client, like it is like really the first deliverable. Like other than like the contract is not a deliverable. Sorry, guys, I could have a great sales team, like fantastic, but like at a certain point you have to deliver either whatever that service or that product is, and that first interaction is so important for how they what is that that impression that they're going to get, that are they going to feel like, okay, this was handled well, this is smooth, and I will continue that relationship, or are they going to start off with oh, that seemed a little bit clunky, I'm a little bit concerned about what the rest of this relationship might look like.
Yeah. I mean, we've done we put so much effort into winning them over with our first impression, right? To get them interested in the product and to show them that, we fulfill their need. And then that second first impression, which I know is a weird phrase, but that impression that the first impression that the delivery team then gets to make with that entity as a customer, right, is super critical, because that sets the tone for how they're going to view their future interactions. If you're non-responsive, they feel your support is going to be non-responsive, that the application might have issues with it. It just kind of opens up that Pandora's box of, oh, this is not ideal, so what else isn't ideal? So really just making sure that you knock that first customer impression out of the park to set the stage for the rest of their tenure with you as a customer, which is hopefully a lifetime, right? Just building that trust right off the bat. You gotta make sure that you're able to fulfill the promise that has been set up along the way with
Yes.
all the good work of the sales team. Otherwise, you've just kind of, you've undone all the good work you've already spent potentially months or years in some sales cycles, right? Building up.
Yeah, and also looking at it, beyond the tech space, in industries like manufacturing, telecom, retail, where often you might, have third-party stakeholders, subcontractors of some sort that play critical roles in these processes. Well, those relationships with, reliable subcontractors, and vendors are almost just as important as with the end client. So it's almost, doubly making that, you know, second first impression great, not only with the client, but also with those other, potential organizations that you're having to team with in order to have a successful rollout of, whether it's a software install, a telecom install, fiber install, machine install, whatever it be. It's critical to make sure that all parties involved, have that similar level of, accountability and visibility.
So I'll ask here, since we've got the NeoStella crew, like, certainly I know, some, and it's expensive and difficult to install. Like, you get field service lightning, where you can actually, like, track installers and things like that. But how how do you see managing, like, those third party vendors, those third party installers? Because that, I think, is like one of the biggest challenges, I would say. Like, you have tons of control within your organization, but when you're also having to rely on others, or potentially several others, to actually complete an installation, that can be, yeah, super challenging.
Yeah, very challenging. And I think, the first step to that is just making sure that you have a solid relationship with them, right? You know them, you know what to expect from them. And then secondarily, I think, is just the systems involved, right? And so in a couple of ways we can work with that, or have worked with that within Work Relay, is one, either getting them involved directly in the application, right, providing them with access so that tasks or steps or issues can be assigned to them, and we can track the resolution of those. Or potentially, if that's not an option for one reason or another, just making sure that we can integrate with whatever systems they are tracking with. We know Salesforce has a very robust API. So, there are instances in the past where we've just had to work with customers to um, make sure that they can integrate with those third parties to pass that information back, so that at least we can track that we're waiting on an outside entity, we're receiving the message back when it has been performed, and then we can move on, so that we don't have those gaps, those missing time elements here in our process, so that we can really get that holistic view. But really, I think a lot of it comes down to what I was talking about before, which is just the relationships, making sure you've got a very solid relationship built on trust. You're all aiming in the right direction, able to rely on each other, and then the system, whatever it's going to be, follows from that.
Yeah, I think the relationship is the key, definitely. But on top of that, what the company has control over is removing as much as possible impediments for working with that third party.
Hmm.
And once you have, again, you mapped your process, you know what's their role in that process, and you can measure their performance. Then, if nothing works, you can always look for a different provider, or compare different providers and say, okay, I have a high value customer that I want to give the best quality service, so I will use the top quality provider, the third party partner that are working with to do their job, and then you can allocate the resources and optimize how, like, who's working on what.
Yeah, I think also just having that transparency within your Salesforce system on what's going on with your third party vendors, if they're part of that installation process, like the customer's going to be calling you. So being able to have that visibility, and like, last thing you want is your customer, if we're talking about the relationship, you don't want your customer support people to, it's the vendor's fault. Sorry, it's the installers. Like without any additional information. Like if they can actually say, oh, it's here, it's like 3 stops away, like, whatever it might be, I think is when we're talking about the maturation process, of a complex installation, like that's the goal right there.
Yeah, I don't know if there's ever more frustrating customer experiences than when you're given that runaround of, well, this isn't my fault, it's their fault. And then you call them and, oh no, you call them. No, I just talked to them. And like, well, I can't help you. And it's
Not my
like,
department.
Well, it's like, well, it's your company. So
yeah, I'm paying you, so you need to help me fix it wherever it is right now, right?
Yeah. Well, let's transition to talk about what we should be doing, right? We've very much highlighted how things can go wrong, and how often we see things that could be done differently. Let's look at what we should be doing. And I did see a question too in the chat that maybe we can kind of work in here too right away. Brandy was asking, do you see people using any form of contact roles to facilitate this? Facilitate managing, third parties with customer onboarding or similar use cases.
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to just kind of kick this off, maybe just with the aid of Work Relay as a kind of a touch point here. So I'll definitely get to Brandy's question, but remind me if I don't, Jared, but we can touch on it kind of along the way. And, I think as we look at Work Relay, again, just kind of baked into the Salesforce application, I'll actually start on this screen, because this goes to what we've actually had conversations with Vanessa about before, right? Around making sure that our process is understood, making sure that it's documented, making sure that it's standardized. So this is probably an interface that's familiar to business analysts or process analysts or whatever the title may be. But those types of Visio or Lucidchart applications where you're designing the process itself, you're indicating who's responsible for each step along the way, where the decision points and the approvals need to happen, and then your high level kind of milestones or phases of an implementation or an installation. And so this is actually the Work Relay designer interface, which is not only designing the process, but is the actual executable process kind of behind the scenes. So each step in this we can see, from reviewing an order to ordering the circuitry and hardware. We're able to build this out in a more comfortable interface that we're probably all used to from a process design standpoint, and then Work Relay runs off of this. So if we think about best practices for our post close, our implementation or installation processes, I think first and foremost is going to be making sure that those are well documented, well understood, and standardized. And so this brings that standardization that potentially spreadsheets and other applications might not, because we're enforcing within each step of this and focusing users into the specific fields that we want them to fill out, and making sure that they can't move forward without it, rather than making them go hunt and find the work that we're hoping that they do. Which kind of brings me to another of the bullet points we've touched on in the past, which is making sure that it's user friendly, right? We've always heard, and Jared, you even kind of said specifically before how anti Salesforce some folks can be, because it feels like so much information to fill out over and over again. You have to find what you're supposed to do at any given point along the way. And the Work Relay task manager, the end user interface, really serves that up for users, so that when it is time to assign, a field service agent or design the hardware, users have this single interface of the tasks that are assigned to them, where they can quickly jump in and know exactly which of those data points we need them to perform before proceeding the step, and then the process carrying on to the next person or the next approval, what have you. So I'll kind of pause there and see if anyone has anything to kind of piggyback on there as far as best practices before we go into the next piece of this.
I'd love to pose a question quick to both Danny and Vanessa. Going back to the process builder, you guys have a lot of experience, going through the exercise of documenting a process, right? And saying what that should look like as far as the flows are concerned. How important have you found, the ability to be dynamic with the way that you can change and adjust, that through the process, where you're not having to create a version, review, verify it, go make updates, review. Give me some idea on your experiences in the past where, being able to really be dynamic and agile with how you map out that process with stakeholders.
I was literally going to mention that before you asked the question. So no, I think that's one of the challenging parts when you're building stuff custom in Salesforce, where I was working with actually a financial services company when I was a consultant, and we ended up building out their whole post-close process using custom objects, and the flow would create 9 tasks for this team that they'd have to. I mean, it was. But a big part of being well architected is it has to be maintainable, and scalable, and you want it to be agile. Businesses are not static, unless you've been making the buttons for the same button factory and the button hasn't changed in 50 years, like that. Even then, the world's still going to change around you. So you have to be able to have your systems keep up with your business, and being able to change things as business changes is super important, and it's not super easy to do if you're building everything custom in Salesforce or doing it on a spreadsheet. Maybe it's a little bit easier on the spreadsheet, but the change management will be killer.
Yeah, I will tell us that putting the processes directly in the system, it gives you a head start on what the system is capable. You can actually do in the system very quickly. And as you go through the discovery process, and as you work with the business on mapping and putting down the processes and all the connections and the dependencies, all those things are unfolding as you discover. So having this dynamic option while doing the discovery is a big advantage that can save you a lot of time, instead of maybe having a meeting and then go to the design and then implement, get some feedback, and then this loop all over again. Instead of that, you can see it in the system as you go, and it's a big advantage.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in one last thing. I know we've talked about this before, but the whole I say it all the time. You have to, document, centralize, and socialize or evangelize, and having a spot where everybody knows what the current process is. Okay, if it's going to change, if we're going to be dynamic, if we're going to be agile, but you always know where to look for the latest, changes to the process, and everybody's working off the same process map and the same steps, because if it changes, it's changing for everybody and everybody knows where to look. Huge benefit.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I've always bumped into as a consultant, architect, admin, whatever the role might have been, is yes, I've built up so much within Salesforce. I've in the past, right, had workflow rules kicking off other workflow rules, and process builder, and then flow, but then my overall process I'm still documenting outside of Salesforce, right, in the past, and it's in a Google Drive folder somewhere or on SharePoint, and people have to know in which of the 7 nested folders to go find it. And this application, Work Relay, as I was first introduced to it years and years ago, was kind of a revelation that, oh my gosh, I finally don't have to store things in multiple places anymore. When a user has a question about the process, they can just click on the actual process name and then go see what it looks like, right? Which is huge for them, and really empowering, and makes them more active in the process because they understand it end to end instead of just knowing I have to do my two pieces regardless of how it impacts anyone else.
It brings up a great point, right? When so many of your actual, workflow or process participants are generally not involved in some form with, the mapping and discovery. Maybe there's some super users and some team leaders or things of that area, but by giving everyone at least access to see this, workflow, it gives a very, very easy opportunity for people to chime in that may be doing this process, every minute, every hour, every day, to say, hey, wait, no, actually, I know for 90% of you, this is the way it goes, but this is the way it goes for us, so it allows for, that evangelization of process improvement to be easily, attained.
Yeah. Not only just understanding what the process is, but then, and this kind of takes me to one of the other kind of advice points or best practices, right? But the measurement of, and the evaluation of what's happening, right? So again, thinking about spreadsheets and different status values or whatever you might have in there, like how measurable is that? Do you know how long it's taking between each of these steps to move from place to place? And does the entire team know, right? Because they should care, right? If you're an actor in a process, you probably care about how the overall process is going because you're all being measured by whether the entire process is successful or not, right? And so what Work Relay surfaces up to management and end users and everyone is a nice concise dashboard for your given process to know, within a given period, how effectively are we running? Are we running on time? Are we overloading certain folks or departments? And then getting really into the granular metrics of step by step. How are things looking, right? Are we seeing a lot of escalations or late completions of steps? And then how's our average duration performing, right? Compared to last month, are we improving? Are we not improving? Is it getting worse? So that we can have those conversations with the different departments involved to say, okay, what's happening here? We see that it's starting to take longer. Are the projects becoming more complex? Are you not getting what you need? Do we need to kind of rethink our expectations and add another step or what have you? It just really allows you to have more conversations around the process to allow it to evolve in the way that your business needs to evolve. So I guess just kind of wrapping that up, that last best practice is not only measuring the process as it's going through, but also then managing to and taking that measurement and actually doing something with it to improve your customer experience in that installation process.
Absolutely.
I was
And
just
this, no, please go ahead, Vanessa.
sorry, I was just gonna say I don't know if I even thought about the how great it would be to help with the resourcing aspect of it. It's so difficult, especially like when you're on the ground doing this stuff on a day-to-day basis. And I told you I used to work in operations for a long time, to be able to justify your headcount and show how much work you're actually like putting through. And this is it is nice where you can like actually like see like we're on the struggle bus. This team's on the struggle bus right now. Like
Mhm.
maybe that'll help with the headcount.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And obviously topical right now is just the entire term data AI, right? How are we utilizing the information that we have? And I think that so often these conversations do focus on, especially in the Salesforce world, it focuses on your sales data, your customer data, your marketing data, maybe you're integrating your service data, your finance data, but that operational data, that end to end, actual task metrics, workflow metrics, that's so often a missing piece. But these are detailed metrics on your most critical processes, often your revenue producing processes. So why, if we're investing in something like a data cloud, why are we not looking at an incredibly holistic means of ingesting the right data as well? So this
Yeah.
is a critical component of that too.
Yeah. And just to kind of tie back to Brandy's question, because I thought I was going to forget it, but I think I remembered it around contact roles. Certainly we do see that in certain cases, right? To identify any of those third parties that we're going to be working with. But I think the way that I think the ideal state is allowing those folks to actually be assignees of the tasks so that you can see that resourcing load, right? We can see if, particular folks are being overloaded, but then also if we can get down to the actual individual level, we can see how that individual is performing so we can identify, do we need to give them more installation training, right? What needs do they have? We're noticing that they're completing their tasks late, or what have you. How can we address that and help them to perform at that desired level? So certainly, yes, using any of those kind of those junction objects or native kind of contact role type objects is helpful to identify who's involved in the process, which is a great step toward being able to address the process as a whole. But from a measurement perspective, we like to try to get down to that individual contributor level if we can, if not the group, so that we can identify what changes might need to take place.
Yep, absolutely.
So I think, Jared, maybe if I flip back here to kind of wrapping up, or kind of overviewing kind of what we've talked about before, maybe that's a good point here with a few minutes left in the conversation.
Yeah. We focus really here on, despite whether we're looking at a focus of, a Salesforce SI implementing, Salesforce in a custom engagement, whether we're looking at telecom, whether we're looking at manufacturing, whether we're looking at retail doing different product installations, or, net new location setup, things like that. There's a lot of keys here that are critical, that seem a little bit at the surface level simple, but that are so often difficult for these organizations to achieve, right? So unless you know exactly where your process bottlenecks are, what's causing them, the trends involved in there, whether your leadership has that minute detail of exactly how those processes performing. If you've not been able to answer no, or if you've answered no to any of these types of questions throughout, this conversation, certainly we can help, and we love to have that conversation, right? But more importantly, I would love to open it up to questions from the audience, with the time that we have left.
While we're waiting for that, are you open to taking a question from a panelist?
Love to.
We'll allow it.
So I'm a product owner now, which means I oversee the Salesforce team for a Salesforce customer. One of the challenges is always going to be, how do we? Yes, we can build stuff custom in Salesforce. What are some of the metrics or the dollars that I can refer to that would, make it, I guess, more palatable for leadership to give me budget to use NeoStella or whatever else I might need, depending on the complexity of the processes. Because they're like, well, yeah, you can build it custom, like do that, but there's maintenance costs, there's people costs. So, what are the metrics that you've seen that have been effective in convincing leadership to move forward?
Yeah, I think, obviously Salesforce is a great toolbox, right? We have everything in that toolbox we could possibly need, really, to do what we need to do. It's just how much do we want to invest in the time and in the licensing to use it. And so one of the ways that one of the exercises that we typically try to go through is, okay, let's understand the process. Right, together with a customer or with a prospect of ours, and now let's start thinking about the time investment that's going to be needed, one, in gathering all of those requirements and gathering all of that process, but then two, in actual Salesforce build time. Let's try to estimate out, much like we would for any kind of development effort, how many hours we think we're going to need to build up each of the components here, whether that's custom fields and custom objects, whether that is trying to build out flow or screen flow or lightning web components, right? It all kind of depends on the complexity of what they're looking to do, and what the toolbox itself can allow for. So I try to go through that exercise of, okay, let's just consider the initial build and delivery of this. What's my timeline to be able to do something like that, inclusive of training and those types of things, and Salesforce licensing, of course. And then we have to start thinking future facing, like you just mentioned, right? We know that this process isn't going to stay this way forever. So let's start to consider what happens if a step, 5 steps, whatever, change along this way, along the way. How large of an impact is that going to be from a workload perspective to then regather requirements, go back and remember what we built out in Flow or whatever it was, rebuild, retrain, go through all of that, right? So we really just tried to measure licensing costs, the actual time investment from a build and release and train perspective, and then that kind of future facing uh, area of things, so that we can try to get kind of a bit of a total cost of ownership, I suppose. And then we start comparing that with the efficiency gains that something like Work Relay is going to provide for you, as far as ease of building, ease of changing, ease of user usage, right? And user adoption alone is a huge cost in some areas for some customers. So that's just a little look, I guess, into how we try to help our customers justify, building out in Salesforce versus looking at an ISV application, a managed package like Work Relay to offset, where the licensing costs is a massive offset from what it would take you to keep building and keep revising over and over again without it.
Yeah, and our team just attended Midwest Streaming, so a lot of those conversations are very, very topical for me. And numerous admins, at smaller organizations, albeit oftentimes, one person show, and just repeatedly, right? The horror stories of, I took over a new org. It ranged from, in the past there were 8 admins that all had access, which sounds horrific for a small company, or there was one person who did so much with Apex that it took them a year to figure out and unravel everything, right? So again, it really hones into businesses large and small. It's the longevity of that ease of management that should be on top of mind at all times, not just we'll take care of that down the line.
Amazing. We do have one question from the audience. Has anyone had a negative experience with product installations from either the customer or the business side?
I mean, all the time. I mean, it's tough. Like with the I mean, as a customer, certainly I've had challenges. Getting my products, but as a consultant, I mean, it's often one of those things that folks want help with in Salesforce, because they do want that customer 360 view. They do want to be able to track how their product is getting delivered to those customers post close. And like I said, Salesforce doesn't have anything great out of the box to track all that stuff. And so they're looking for ways to capture those metrics, to capture those steps, and to see when those steps were completed and who completed those steps. I mean, that was often something that would come up as a consultant, because there were problems. There's only so, like I said, there's only so much that you can do with those spreadsheets and emails before you want to get to that next level of excellence in your organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately
and
it happens more often than not, right? That you're ending up in a challenging situation. Recently, this is more on the software side, but recently we as an organization started, acquired a piece of software or an application that we were going to use, and sales process was great. Everyone's super charming, super, team mentality. We're going to get, this is going to revolutionize things for us. Sign the contracts, silence, right? What do I do now? How do I get my licenses? How do I implement this? And it's a lot of like, well, you can go to this help site and you can sign up here, and sorry, the password didn't work. And it's that, again, that first impression that's just like, oh, well, now I have to have a different conversation with the person that sold this to me. So I unfortunately think it happens more often than not, where even just that handoff from salesperson to account manager or whatever the role is sometimes lost, or you finally hear from them a week later and that's a lost week that I could have been doing so much. So yeah, I think it's hard to find, I think, an ideal experience, unfortunately, by default.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
and I don't think any company wants to be that bad company with bad reputation that doesn't deliver. Nobody wants that. But companies has budget constraints, right? They can't make their Salesforce environment robust as much as they want. They have to invest the money where it's has the most impact. And sometimes the management, they just don't know what's that place where that does all the impact. And it's not the sales department, that's for sure, because that brings all the customers, and the operational part usually gets the budget cuts.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think that's why I think business is evolving a little bit generally, where there there really were a lot of silos around, like, okay, sales here, marketing here, operations here, and there's a lot more of at least from what I've seen, like a move towards RevOps, where you have somebody that's overseeing every revenue generating department, in trying to make it a bit more cohesive so you can break some of those silos. But I think, again, with your organizational maturation process, like, some are still kind of existing in those silos, and if they want to stay competitive, they're going to need to bring those teams together, and work together better so that they can, like, have a smooth delivery, so that there isn't like a hard pivot to post close installation, hard pivot into account management, whatever it might be.
Amazing, cool. And I think there was one more. Has anyone on the panel tried to create an AI bot to answer questions about the current state?
Oh, that's interesting. I think just in learning more about, kind of the Einstein AI and those things that are out there, I've obviously gone through um, some of that just to kind of get my hands around it. But interestingly, it is, we know that AI is a huge thing, and one of the things that we're actively developing right now is more of a tie into AI, so that we can hopefully provide users with a very quick summary of, okay, you've got a lot of metrics on here, but can I just click a button to get a summary of maybe the items that I should pay more attention to than less? I see a lot of red on this screen, but where should my eye go first? Give me more of a human readable, human consumable kind of synopsis. So that's something that we're actively working on at the moment to build into Work Relay. But yeah, unsure if anyone else on the panel has gone through the bot building process.
I mean, I think the question was like, how to capture current state, and honestly, I think, while I love AI and I think it can be super helpful when you're doing discovery and trying to understand what the current state is before you start making improvements, I think it's really important you have that human element, because and just from my consulting years, but also business analysis in general, like, you need to be able to show empathy and help people through their process, and when they trust you, they're a little bit more willing to tell you the stuff that you're not necessarily going to see,
Mhm.
if you're just kind of throwing out a bot with some questions that they have to fill in by text. Like, if Tom in accounting, who's married to his spreadsheets, is the problem, like, having a human conversation about that, like, is a little bit easier to get down to that, so you can really incorporate and understand what the friction points are. So I wouldn't, especially for discovery and getting that current state, to be accurate, I wouldn't remove the human element. Certainly, you can use AI transcription tools and things like that to help come up with action items and summarize things, key findings. But yeah, I wouldn't take the human out quite yet.
I think the AI is as good as the data that it consumes, right? I mean, if you had corrupted data, incomplete data, wrong data, and so on, the AI will not give you what you need. So you have to make sure the first thing, the basic, is to focus on gathering the data, measuring it, and if there's a saying, kind of, if it's reportable, only then it's AI-able, or I don't know if I said it wrong, but that's but the point is that you need to focus on making sure you have access to the data and in a processed way, and only then you can grow and make it useful for AI.
Amazing. Last call for any last questions.
Looks like some folks were just wondering where to find the recording. If you could just touch on that, Saima.
Yep. So the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. You will be able to watch the whole thing back there.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah, it'll also be on this LinkedIn Live link. So it should still be there, but certainly if you're going onto the Salesforce Ben site, it wouldn't be under videos. I think it's under like live streaming. I think it's like another tab. So just make sure that you find that section. Just from my previous experience.
Have you done a few of these, Vanessa?
Awesome. Thanks, Vanessa. But yeah, if there are no more questions, then I think I will wrap up the session now. Very quickly, I did pop a chat in the comments on LinkedIn if you'd like to. I did pop a chat. I did pop a link in the comments box on LinkedIn if you'd like to check it out and take the discussion further. But a huge thank you to all of our speakers for leading a fantastic session. And also a huge thank you to all of you for tuning in and for your participation and questions throughout. Before we wrap up, speakers, panelists, any final thoughts to share with our audience?
I feel like this was like therapeutic for me. So thanks, guys.
No, definitely Vanessa and Danny, especially appreciate your contributions here and helping us have this conversation. And Eric, of course, always thank you to you too.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was fun.
Very fun. Yeah, loved it.
Amazing, cool. So thank you all again for coming and engaging with the session. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and hopefully see you soon at our next LinkedIn Live. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.